Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Meredith Beavin, a pharmacist with a fascination for true crime, and I'm here with my wife and co host, Andy. Today, we're diving into the world of medications, the ones that can heal or turn deadly. So sit back, relax, listen, and learn. This is The Medicine Murders. Okie dokie, artichoke, episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
Can you believe? Oh, wait, this isn't episode 6.
Seven.
Episode 7.
Wow.
I don't know how. Oh gosh, if this gets any longer, I'm gonna forget all the episodes. I lied. This is episode 7.
Okay.
Recording on January 6th, a week after New Year's Eve. Which we had a blast on New Year's Eve. I went to bed promptly at 1:15 with my friend Sam, and Andy stayed up a little longer, but I feel like it was a successful New Year's Eve party.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm your host, Meredith Beavin, and that is my co-host / wife, Andy.
Hello.
And here at The Medicine Murders, we dive into chilling cases where medicine, trust, and murder collide.
Mm.
Do you like that name, The Medicine Murders? I think about it every day.
She's stuck between a couple options, and this is what we landed on.
I like
think
it.
it's good.
I like it. Maybe I'll write a book one day, and that's what I think it's a book title. I don't think it's a podcast, but I enjoy it.
No, I like it.
I like it.
I like it a lot.
Okay. I'll get over them. So today's episode starts with a love story. A couple with a bright future and shared dreams, but behind their picture-perfect life, something sinister was lurking. By the end of this tale, Andy, you'll be questioning how well you can ever truly know someone. Not me, don't worry about it.
Oh.
That makes you scared for a sec. Trust me. If you know me. I couldn't even, I had to pack our robes to give them to you. That's the kind of person I am.
Yeah.
Before Christmas. Let's walk through the moments that led to an unimaginable conclusion. A story of ambition, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of secrets hidden for too long. The scene starts like this. The evening air in San Diego was cool and crisp. The kind of calm that November brings just before the holidays. Streetlights cast soft halos over quiet streets as the city slowed down for the night. Inside an upscale apartment, however, the stillness was about to unravel. The 911 dispatcher's voice was steady, but the woman on the other end of the line was anything but. "My husband. He's not breathing," she cried, her words sharp and frantic. The dispatcher's calm instructions filtered through the phone, but panic clung to the woman's every syllable. Within minutes, paramedics arrived at the scene. The front door was ajar, as though it had been left open in a frenzy. They exchanged wary glances before stepping inside. The apartment was eerily quiet. The faint scent of something floral drifted through the air, soft but unmistakable. In the bedroom, their eyes were drawn to the bed. A man lay still amid a scattering of rose petals, like a strange, sorrowful painting.
Okay.
I should have looked up how to say his name. His name was Greg de Villers. I think his name is.
Okay.
I looked it up.
How's it spelled?
It's French. Greg Devillers.
V-I.
I looked it up like a week ago, but I forgot to look it up right before.
Villers?
I think it's Villers. It's French. Okay, we're back. We did look up how to say it. It's Greg de Villiers. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say Greg from now on, but
okay.
Out of respect, I wanted to say it right once.
Yep.
Just 26 years old, his body was still, his features pale. The arrangement of petals felt too intentional, almost staged, as though meant to tell a story in the silence. Standing nearby was a young woman with blonde hair, disheveled and damp from tears. She hugged herself, her entire frame trembling. Her face was ghostly pale, her cheeks streaked with mascara. "I found him like this," she whispered hoarsely. Her name was Kristen. She was Greg's wife. Her gaze drifted to the nightstand, where an empty bottle of cold medicine stood upright. "He's been struggling," she murmured, barely meeting their eyes. "I think he couldn't take it anymore," she said. The paramedics paused, exchanging an uneasy glance. Something fell off. So the intro to this story, I wrote as a little mystery. I was trying to do a little bit different. Did you like it?
I did.
Okay. Because now I'm going to get onto the real story.
Okay.
A background of Kristen and Greg. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I was trying to be Mr. Ballin. Did I sound like a Mr. Ballin?
Yeah.
It kind of did. He's a little bit more dramatic, I think. He has a lot more sound effects.
Yeah. But,
I'll go back to my normal storytelling now.
yeah. No, I liked it.
All right. So where we left off, something felt a little off to the paramedics. So now I'm going to go back in time. We're going to talk about Kristen and we're going to talk about Greg and how they met. Ready? So Kristin Rossum. She was born to a world of high expectations and endless ambition in Claremont, California. Success simply wasn't an aspiration, it was a birthright. The Rossum name carried weight in academic circles. Her father was a respected professor whose lectures drew crowds. Her mother was a university administrator known for her no-nonsense brilliance. And their home was filled with books, debates over dinner, and conversations that demanded intelligence and wit. Kristen thrived in this environment, or at least she seemed to. She was the golden child, sharp, accomplished, and effortlessly captivating. At school, teachers marveled at her potential, and classmates envied her poise. Is that right? Poise? She excelled in science and math, earning awards and praise that only fed the belief that she was destined for greatness. But beneath the surface, Kristen's polished exterior cracks were forming. In private moments, Kristen felt suffocated by the weight of expectations. There was no room for failure in the Rossum household, no space for weakness. By the time she reached high school, Kristen had discovered an outlet that dulled the pressure. Perfection wasn't just something that she strived for, it was something she could control. She became obsessed with achievement and appearances, and when that wasn't enough, she sought escape in something far darker: drugs. It began innocently enough, a prescription pill here, a study aid there, but eventually, Kristen's experimentation deepened into something more dangerous. By the time she reached college, she was dabbling in methamphetamine. The drug offered a cruel illusion: boundless energy, razor sharp focus, and a way to silence the doubts that echoed in her mind. Is that better? She could study all night, ace her exams, and smile through every expectation, but beneath the surface, she was unraveling. Her family knew nothing of this double life. To them, she was still their brilliant daughter. Her acceptance into the University of Redlands and later into the highly competitive internship at the medical examiner's office seemed to confirm their belief in her invincibility. But Kristen was teetering on the edge of self-destruction. It wasn't until her second year at the internship that everything came crashing down. Kristen was caught stealing lab-grade chemicals, an unthinkable offense in a field built on trust and integrity. The revelation was devastating, and the consequences were swift. Her academic career was in jeopardy, and the internship was over. Her family was horrified. For the first time, Kristen's facade cracked wide open. Her parents pushed her into rehab, determined to fix what had gone wrong. But to Kristen, it felt like punishment for being human, for not living up to the impossible standards that had defined her life. Rehab is where Kristen first began to rebuild herself, or at least the version of herself she thought she needed to become. She got clean, pieced together her resume, and found a way back into the medical examiner's office after completing her degree. The second chance wasn't just a lifeline, it was her proof to the world that she could be perfect again. She poured herself into her work, gaining a reputation for her precision and expertise in toxicology. That's when she met Greg. Greg wasn't like anyone Kristen had ever known. He was gentle where others were harsh, steady where her life felt chaotic. His kindness felt like sunlight after a storm, a reminder that life didn't have to be a constant battle for approval. With him, Kristen felt safe. For a while, it seemed as though she had finally outrun the shadows of her past. She and Greg married in a quiet, beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and family. But addiction is a patient predator, lurking until weakness returns. Kristen's job surrounded her with temptation: vials of chemicals, compounds, different powders. Everything she had once sought to escape was now within reach. The weight of perfection began to press down on her again. Her marriage to Greg, once a source of comfort, began to feel like another form of pressure. Greg wanted a life of quiet stability, but Kristen craved excitement. She grew restless and resentful. The facade she worked so hard to rebuild began to crumble. And when a new man entered her life, charming, charismatic, and dangerous, Kristen felt herself pulling back into the world she thought she had left behind. She began using methamphetamine again, hiding the signs from Greg as long as she could. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and the life Kristen had built was about to collide with the truth she could no longer bury. Their relationship began with late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. They'd talk about everything: his love for science, her ambitions, their dreams for the future. Greg's quiet thoughtfulness balanced Kristen's restless ambition. Where she was sharp and witty, he was steady and warm. He didn't need the spotlight to feel whole. Their first few years of marriage seemed idyllic. They moved into an upscale apartment in San Diego, where Greg worked in biotech while Kristen thrived at the medical examiner's office. They went on weekend trips to the coast, spent lazy Sunday mornings in making pancakes, and hosted small dinner parties with friends. On their surface, they seemed like the perfect couple, ambitious, smart, and in love. But underneath the polished facade, cracks were beginning to form. Her colleagues trusted her expertise, but that trust was a constant reminder of the life she had almost lost. She began to feel trapped by the weight of her reputation and the pressure to keep up appearances. Greg, meanwhile, was eager to start a family. He dreamed of a home filled with laughter and children, a simple, fulfilling life. But Kristen wasn't ready. She spoke of promotions and professional goals, of needing more time to find herself before settling down. The conversations about their future grew strained. The strain only deepened when Kristen began working closely with a new colleague at the medical examiner's office, a man named Dr. Michael Robertson. He was charismatic and commanding, with the air of danger that intrigued Kristen. Their shared fascination with chemistry became something else entirely, a magnetic connection that blurred professional boundaries. Greg began to sense that something was wrong. The woman he had fallen in love with seemed distant, distracted. She was no longer the same bright presence he had married. There were late nights at the office, unexplained absences, and a growing sense of emotional detachment. I work at CVS, so if I'm ever late, it's not because of that.
No, I know. I know.
It's because someone caught me while we were closing and then real quickly was like, hey, can you open real quick? I know you're closing, but can my medicine's already ready. And then when I do that, their medicine's actually not ready. But then so I have to get it ready while they're there. And then it's 20 minutes past closing, and then I finally checked them out and locked up.
Yep. I know.
Good.
I never work late.
No, you work late.
I work till like
But it's because you're
7 or
chit chatting.
8. Yeah. That's different.
You're doing girl chats.
Yep.
Whatever the hell that is. I just made it up.
That's just the consequence of working in the
beauty industry. Okay. So when Greg confronted her, Kristen brushed off his concerns with excuses about work stress. But Greg knew in his heart that something deeper was unraveling. Despite his growing suspicions, he held on to hope. He believed in her, believed in their love, and was determined to fight for their marriage. But Greg didn't know how deep Kristen's struggles went or how far she had already fallen. Kristen was spiraling. The temptation of drugs, the lure of forbidden excitement, and the weight of her double life created a storm she couldn't control. And as she sank deeper into addiction and infidelity, she began to see Greg not as her lifeline, but as an obstacle, a reminder of everything she wasn't. In the months leading up to that November night, their once perfect life had become a series of tense conversations and unspoken fears. Greg's patience was wearing thin. And Kristen felt cornered. She was desperate to escape the life she had built but no longer wanted. What happened that night in November would shock everyone who knew them, this devastating climax of a story that had turned into a tragedy. November 6, 2000, began like any other quiet Monday. The sky over San Diego shifted from pale morning hues to a dim gold of dusk. Greg had spent the afternoon at home, replying to emails, reading, and reflecting. He had been trying to find clarity, a way to mend the fractures of his marriage. Kristen arrived home later than expected, her mood unreadable, her movements quick and distracted. She barely spoke as she set down her purse and disappeared into the bathroom, closing the door a little too firmly behind her. Greg watched her go, his stomach knotted with unease. The silence between them was no longer comfortable, it was thick, with things unsaid. That night, Greg tried again. Kristen, we need to talk, he said, his voice soft but firm. She barely looked at him. I'm tired, she murmured, brushing past him toward the bedroom. Greg followed him, willing to let the moment slip away. Whatever's happening, we can fix it. We're supposed to be a team. Kristen paused at the edge of the bed, her back to him. Her shoulders rose and fell with a long, slow breath. But when she turned to face him, her eyes were distant. You can't fix everything, Greg. The weight of those words settled in the room like a dark cloud. Greg's heart sank, but he didn't know this would be the last conversation they'd ever have. Sometime after that, the details grew a little murky. What happened in those final moments between them remains unclear, but the truth would soon emerge in fragments, whispers from the past, pieced together by evidence. Later that night, at 9:24 p.m., a 911 call shattered the stillness of the night. Kristen's voice, shrill and frantic, echoed down the line. My husband, he's not breathing, she claimed. She had found him unconscious in their bed and didn't know what happened. The paramedics arrived within minutes. The front door was ajar, swaying slightly as the breeze from the hallway whispered through the opening. They entered cautiously, their senses sharpened by years of emergency calls that turned deadly. The living room was tidy, eerily untouched by the panic Kristen's voice had conveyed. But when they reached the bedroom, the sight before them was strange and unsettling. Greg lay on the bed, his arms limp at his sides, his face pale and serene. Scattered rose petals surrounded his body, their deep red stark against their white sheets. At first glance, it almost looked romantic, like something staged for a photograph. But beneath the roses was a stillness that no love story could explain. Kristen stood near the nightstand, her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes wide and glassy. Her face was streaked with tears, her lips quivering as she spoke. She said, I came in, and he was like this. She pointed to the empty cold medicine bottle on the nightstand. He's been depressed, I think. Her words broke into shallow sobs. I think he took too much, she told the paramedic. The paramedics began CPR, working desperately to revive Greg, but deep down, they knew it was too late. The signs of life were long gone. Minutes later, the apartment was swarming with police officers, investigators, and more medics. The calm night outside stood in sharp contrast to the chaos inside. The smell of roses mixed with the sterile scent of the medical equipment they carried in. As officers questioned Kristen, her story stayed the same. Greg had been struggling, she claimed, overwhelmed with stress, spiraling into depression. She had come home to find him surrounded by petals, an empty bottle of cold medicine beside him. It must have been suicide, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. But the detectives weren't convinced. One officer scanned the room, noting the meticulously placed petals, the perfectly arranged bottle, and the lack of signs of struggle. Nothing about it felt spontaneous. Nothing about it felt real. And as they prepared to take Greg's body for an autopsy, one thought lingered in every investigator's mind. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. In the days that followed Greg's death, the San Diego Police Department quickly launched a formal investigation. Though the initial 911 call suggested a possible suicide, something about the scene didn't sit right with the first responders. The rose petals, the cold medicine bottle, and the unsettling calm in the apartment felt like a staged play than a tragedy born from despair. The autopsy results arrived quickly, and they shattered any remaining doubt. Greg's death wasn't caused by an overdose of cold medicine. Instead, the toxicology report revealed a fatal dose of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid so potent that a few milligrams could shut down the human body within minutes. Fentanyl wasn't a common drug to encounter outside of controlled medical settings, and it certainly wasn't something found in over-the-counter medicine. The investigator knew this wasn't a tragic accident, it was murder. And this was in 2000. I mean, nowadays fentanyl seems a pretty common subject, but in the early 2000s, it was something brand new. And so the investigators started to piece it together. The first step was to look at Greg's life and emotional state. Interviews with friends and family painted a consistent picture. Greg wasn't suicidal. He was a kind, driven, and thoughtful man who loved his work and his family. His brothers, Jerome and Bertrand, awesome names. Bertrand, I love that name.
Wait, do you say it like that?
Bertrand?
Bertrand?
Yeah, Bertrand.
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 Bertrand. What am I saying it differently than you?
Yeah.
How?
Bertrand.
Bertrand.
You're saying Bertrand.
Yeah.
Bertrand.
Bertrand.
It's still an A. It's a soft A.
Bertrand.
Bertrand.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
I mean, you want to look it up, but it's Bertrand.
No, I'm Bertrand.
Bertrand is so...
Am I saying it wrong?
I mean, I guess it's a matter of accents, but oh my gosh, what is that noise?
I don't know.
I guess it's a matter of accents, but I don't know.
Do I have an accent?
No.
You think I have an accent?
No. I'm just saying that, like, I think we just say different things. I don't know.
Okay. His brothers Jerome and Bertrand, were especially vocal in their certainty. Greg would never have taken his own life. They insisted he'd been planning for the future and was deeply in love with Kristen, even if he had grown worried about their relationship. As detectives retraced Greg's final weeks, they found that things at home had been strained. Friends revealed that Greg had recently confined in them. Kristen was acting distant, staying out late, and evading his questions. There was another man. Greg suspected a colleague at the San Diego Medical Examiner's office. The investigation shifted toward Kristin Rossum, Greg's wife. Kristen was already known in the professional circles as a gifted toxicologist with expertise in analyzing poison and chemicals. She worked in the very office that processed autopsy results, a chilling irony given the circumstances. Her access to fentanyl raised immediate red flags. The drug was used for severe pain management, often in surgeries or palliative care, and was tightly controlled. There was no plausible way for Greg to have obtained it on his own. But for someone like Kristen, who worked in a lab filled with controlled substances, the opportunity was clear. Detectives noted the symbolism of the red rose petals scattered over Greg's body. This seemed to hint at a love and loss, and also for something Kristen might have staged deliberately. The investigation uncovered surveillance footage from a local store that showed Kristen buying roses just hours before Greg's death. This purchase, though innocuous at first glance, became a cornerstone of the case. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Kristen had been having an affair with her boss, Dr. Michael Robertson, the chief toxicologist at the medical examiner's office. Robertson was older, married, and charismatic, a man who commanded attention in any room. The relationship had crossed professional boundaries and was well known to those who worked with them. Even if no one spoke about it openly, it became clear that Greg had learned of the affair. He had threatened to expose it and was contemplating leaving Kristen altogether. The investigators began to connect the dots. Kristen had everything to lose. If Greg left and revealed the affair, her reputation and career would be ruined. She could lose her job, her standing, and the admiration she had always craved. Who cares? Don't kill someone.
Also, I don't know. Move.
Move! That's our last story. Just move.
Move.
How many people in the world, Andy?
Move.
7 billion? 8 billion?
Billion, probably more.
They'll forget about you in 45 minutes. They'll start TikTok, and they will forget about you in 45 minutes. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Kristen maintained her innocence throughout the investigation, insisting Greg had taken his own life. But the mounting evidence told a different story. Investigators subpoena. Why does investigators sound like a weird word? Am I saying that right?
Investigators is fine.
Okay.
Subpoena.
Investigators subpoenaed her work computer and found something damning. Searches related to fentanyl effects, particularly how small doses can be lethal without leaving obvious signs of a struggle. Kristen's access to fentanyl through her work, combined with the research she had done, made it increasingly difficult to believe her claims of ignorance. Detectives also reviewed phone records that showed an influx of text messages between Kristen and Robertson. Many of them sent the day of Greg's death. Their tone was cryptic but urgent, filled with language that suggested tension and fear rather than concern. During interviews, Kristen's demeanor was calm but defensive. She described Greg as troubled and claimed he had been dealing with overwhelming stress. But when asked about how Greg would have obtained fentanyl, her answers became evasive. The detectives pressed harder, pointing out the inconsistencies in her story: the roses, the research, her affair, and the controlled substances that had killed Greg. Kristen's mask began to slip. She became visibly agitated, her voice raising. Is that your phone? Oh.
Mm-hmm.
She became visibly agitated, her voice rising as she reiterated that Greg had been depressed and must have found a way to take his own life. But the detectives weren't buying it. They didn't need a confession, they needed proof. The most damning evidence came from the autopsy itself. The medical examiner noted the complete lack of injection marks or signs that Greg had ingested the fentanyl orally. Instead, they suspected the drug had been administered nasally, like inhaled. This method pointed directly to Kristen's knowledge of chemical compounds and how they could be disguised. Combined with the timeline events, the rose petals, the affair, the investigators now had enough to make their case. On the surface, it looked like a tragic love story gone wrong, but in reality, it was carefully orchestrated murder by someone who thought she could outsmart the system. Kristin Rossum, the toxicologist who studied poisons for a living, had become the very thing she once analyzed: a killer hiding behind chemistry and manipulation. The investigation into Greg's death had built a mountain of evidence against Kristen. After weeks of gathering statements, analyzing forensic data, and piecing together her web of deceit, authorities were ready to make their move. And on February 2nd, 2001, detectives arrived at Kristen's San Diego apartment with a warrant for her arrest. When she opened the door, she was calm, almost expectant. Just casually, she greeted the offers without much surprise. Kristen was handcuffed and escorted to the squad car as a small crowd of neighbors gathered in hushed disbelief. She was formally charged with first-degree murder, with the prosecution alleging that she had poisoned Greg with fentanyl to prevent him from exposing her affair and ruining her career. The arrest made headlines across the country. The media couldn't resist the sensational details. The blonde toxicologist accused of using a deadly opioid, the scattered rose petals, and the forbidden office affair. Kristen's trial began in October 2002, nearly 2 years after Greg's death. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and spectators drawn to the drama. At the center of it all sat Kristen, her expression carefully neutral, dressed in modest blouses and soft pastels, a far cry from the confident professional she had once been. The prosecution's case was devastating. They argued that Kristen, driven by greed, ambition, and a desperate desire to be with her lover, had murdered her husband. They painted a vivid picture of the scene: Greg's body surrounded by roses, fentanyl in his system, and Kristen's attempts to frame the death as a suicide. The prosecutor emphasized Kristen's knowledge of poisons, her access to controlled substances, and her meticulous research on fentanyl's effects. She knew exactly what she was doing, the prosecutor said. This was not an act of desperation, it was an act of control. They also highlighted the strained state of the marriage and Greg's discovery of the affair with Dr. Michael Robertson. Witnesses testified that Greg had confided in friends and family, saying he was devastated and ready to leave Kristen. Kristen's defense team maintained her innocence, arguing that Greg had been depressed and had taken his own life. They pointed to the emotional toll Greg had endured in recent months and tried to discredit the idea that Kristen had a clear motive. They painted her as a struggling wife who was being unfairly villainized for her past struggles and addiction. But the defense faced an uphill battle. Toxicology evidence was damning. The traces of fentanyl in Greg's system were consistent and deliberate administration, not an accident or self-inflicted overdose. The timeline didn't align with the suicide, and the stage rose petals suggested someone had deliberately crafted the scene. Perhaps the most damning moment for the defense came when Dr. Robertson himself was called to testify. He admitted to the affair, further undermining the defense's attempt to portray Kristen as a devoted wife. He denied any involvement in Greg's death, but acknowledged that his relationship with Kristen had been reckless. His testimony sealed Kristen's fate. Any lingering doubt about her innocence was crushed by his admission. So after a 6-week trial and 4 days of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. When the verdict was read aloud, Kristen's composure finally cracked. She bit her lip, her hands trembling as tears welled in her eyes. But there was no outburst, no plea for mercy, just quiet acceptance of what she had long feared. The judge delivering the sentence spared no words. He condemned Kristen not only for the murder itself, but for the betrayal of her husband's love and trust. He described the act as cold, calculated, and devastatingly cruel. Kristin Rossum was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Greg's family wept as the verdict was read, relieved that justice had been served, but heartbroken over their loss. Greg's brothers, who had fought tirelessly to ensure his death wasn't dismissed as a suicide, later said that no sentence could bring Greg back, but at least the truth had been revealed. Kristen's case continued to make waves in the years that followed. She became known as the American Beauty Killer, a reference to the roses that eerily mirrored the imagery from the popular film. Dr. Michael Robertson resigned from his position and left the country, though he was never formally charged with any crimes related to the case. Kristen appealed her conviction multiple times, claiming prosecutorial misconduct and errors in the handling of evidence, but all her appeals were denied. She remains incarcerated, a toxicologist whose knowledge of deadly substances ultimately became her downfall.
Wow.
Once again, everyone, just leave.
If you went bad.
If me?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Like a toxicologist to...
Pharmacist to murderer? No. I would never do it. I'm a punk.
Are you a punk? Yeah, you are.
I'm not never do it. Like we said before, just leave. Get a divorce, leave. Who would have known? Like, maybe the affair came out, he would have maybe left his wife, and they maybe would have lived happily ever after. Mm-hmm. You don't know the future. Mm-hmm. Just leave. Mm-hmm. And who cares? They won't fire you because you're... who cares? People. Mm-hmm. I don't understand. But good news is... Dun, 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 dun. Talk nerdy, talk nerdy. That's
to me.
All right, I'm gonna try again. So it sounds like that's a good music, right?
Yeah.
Talk nerdy
to me.
That's good. I actually forgot our pop quiz song.
Oh, I don't know.
Pop quiz. I immediately remembered it. Pop quiz. Pop quiz. That's it.
That was it? Mm-hmm. Oh. I don't remember.
I know you don't listen to our videos, but...
Please stop. I'm in them. Why do I have to listen to it?
Sorry, our dog is annoying at me. All right. Ready for the talk nerdy part?
Yep.
And our new song, Talk Nerdy.
Mm-hmm.
Talk nerdy
To me.
That's pretty good. We should record that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you guys know. Everyone go to YouTube, type in.
No. No, please.
Andy's stopping me, but Andy's a gifted singer.
No.
Anywho.
I really don't want anyone to see that.
Yeah, they don't need to see your plays.
Cutting that out.
Okay, I'll cut it out. All right, let's dive into the science behind today's case and answer some important questions. What's fentanyl? Why is it so deadly? And how can naloxone, also known as Narcan, save lives? Have you heard of Narcan?
Yes.
Isn't it a beautiful thing?
Mm-hmm.
Narcan. I want everyone to know it. I want it to be repeated. I thought it would be very important with the new year to teach everyone about Narcan.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree?
Yes.
As a pharmacist, I love Narcan. I love handing it out. I love giving it to people. I hate the price of it. If you have insurance, sometimes it's no charge. But the OTC version of Narcan is a little expensive. But most states have a standing order, which means you can get it without a prescription. Your insurance will pay for it. Little pharmacy knowledge. But if you aren't in a pharmacy, Narcan is over the counter, and you can just purchase it now. Enough said. Fentanyl. How was fentanyl invented? Fentanyl was created in 1959 by Dr. Paul Janssen, a Belgian chemist. He was looking for a way to treat severe pain without the drawbacks of existing opioids like morphine. Fentanyl worked faster and was much stronger, making it a breakthrough for surgeries and cancer pain relief. By the 1990s, pharmaceutical companies began releasing fentanyl patches and lozenges for chronic pain patients. But because fentanyl was so potent, it didn't take long for illegal labs to start making their own version and mix it into other drugs. Today, illegal fentanyl is one of the main drivers of the opioid crisis. So fentanyl is an opioid, which means it binds to the opioid receptors in your brain, the same ones that regulate pain and breathing. In small, controlled doses, it's an effective pain reliever, but too much can overwhelm the system, slowing your breathing until it stops altogether. It only takes about 2 milligrams, the size of a few grains of salt, to cause a deadly overdose. And because it's often mixed into other drugs without people knowing, many overdoses happen accidentally. A little background on fentanyl. I will cover fentanyl in another. Opioids is going to be, I think, like 2 or 3 episodes. So I'm just going to kind of introduce you here. But the biggest little nugget, because I feel like with the opioid crisis, people know about opioids. And they get the gist of it, right?
Yeah.
It kills people. Done. But I want people to take from this episode the importance of Narcan. So we're going to move on from fentanyl to Narcan.
Okay.
So how does naloxone or Narcan work? So naloxone is a life-saving medication designed to reverse opioid overdoses. And here's how it works. Naloxone travels to the opioid receptors in the brain and kicks off the fentanyl, or any opioid. Once naloxone binds those receptors, it blocks the effects of the opioid. In 2 to 5 minutes, the person can start breathing again, but naloxone doesn't last long. It only stays active for about 30 to 90 minutes. While fentanyl can remain in the body much longer, that's why it's important to call 911 even if the person wakes up after naloxone. They may need more doses or additional medical help. So when you purchase naloxone over the counter, it comes in 2 doses. So because 1 dose doesn't always work. So you do, because of this, there might be too much fentanyl that overtakes. Right. So you do 1 dose, you see how it works, you wait about 5 minutes. If it doesn't work, you do the other dose. And this is how naloxone comes. Over the counter, it's a nasal spray, but there are other forms. So how to use naloxone? First, we're going to talk about the nasal spray, Narcan, which is over the counter. You tilt the person's head back. You insert the nozzle into one nostril. You press the plunger to release the spray. You wait 2 to 3 minutes. If they don't respond, you use the second dose in the other nostril. So each pack is 2 doses.
Okay.
Because odds are you will need the second dose. It's kind of like an EpiPen. You know how all EpiPens come with 2 doses?
Yeah.
Just in case the first fails.
Yeah.
And then you have the injection or intramuscular version of it. You draw the naloxone to a syringe, you inject into the thigh or upper arm muscle, and you wait a few minutes, then give the other dose if needed. And then we have the auto injector, which is like an EpiPen. It's called Evzio, EVZIO. And when you press it, the auto injector, it talks you through the process step by step. So how to get naloxone. This is the important part. In most states' pharmacies, you don't need a prescription. You just ask the pharmacist. They're called standing orders. and you can usually use your insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can just buy it over the counter. Just ask. We'll hand you the over-the-counter one.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know. I don't think that you can use your insurance. But it's kind of like asking for a COVID test. Like, you don't need a prescription for a COVID test, but we can run it through your insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing. Or a vaccine, for instance. You don't need a prescription for a vaccine. There's a standing order.
Right.
A standing order means one doctor in the whole state is the doctor for that order.
Yeah.
So just ask. Ask your pharmacist. You have community programs where a lot of health departments and nonprofits give out free naloxone kits. Some even deliver them by mail. You have doctors and healthcare providers. You can ask them for a prescription and they'll explain the best version for you. Or there's online programs. So there are websites run by public health departments and they'll mail you a naloxone kit for free, no questions asked. I think that's another key thing here is that the Good Samaritan law. You can't get in trouble for helping them or calling the police or let's say they're not overdosing, but you give them naloxone anyway. It's not hurting them. So even if you don't know what's going on, feel free to give them naloxone. It won't hurt them, won't cause it. If there's no opioids in the system, nothing will happen. So feel free to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
The standard dose for Narcan is Narcan nasal spray is 4 milligrams per spray. Once again, it's safe. You can give to anyone unsure of someone who's overdosing. If it's not opioids, naloxone won't hurt them. And after giving naloxone, always call 911.
Yeah.
Have you heard the Good Samaritan law before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In school.
Good.
I would also say that, like, especially if you live in a city, I think it's.
I carry it with me. Yeah, it's in my car.
Yeah. I don't live in a city. It's not very prevalent anywhere I happen to be.
I carry it with me because I work in a pharmacy, but I could just grab it off the shelf. Yeah. But I just know, also as a pharmacist, I know I'm going to help people who are on the ground. It's just my life. So, but that being said, not everyone's used to just walking up to people. So, just leave it in your car because it could even be your friend. You don't know what people are going through. And if you don't know if it's not an overdose, it's something else, it won't hurt. So it would only help.
True. Run one through our insurance.
Well, I will. I'll run with it, but I have one. So, I mean, unless you want one. Do you want one? I'll give one to you. Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
I'll give them to you and you can hand them out at work. Don't do that.
We'll have one at work.
Have one at work. That's perfect. Awesome. I have about 57 at my work, so I'm okay. EpiPens too. I used to have an EpiPen in my car, but it expired.
I only really hear at work. I only really hear at work.
That's true. Yeah, just leave it at work. Well, I used to, I keep it in my car because I have just like this vision that I just know one day I'm going to be driving because we live in Baltimore. I live near Baltimore. Yeah. I'll be driving and there'll be someone like asleep at a gas station or like a bus stop or something. And I know it's not safe, but I have the need to help people. I'll call the police first, but that's another key thing. Just call first. Go Siri, call 911. You don't have to do it by hand. And get someone there because Narcan only works for so long.
I probably shouldn't have said that. I feel like other people's cars are going to start activating their phones.
Ah, you're right. I'll take it out. Just tell your phone to call 911.
Yes.
Anywho, well, let's talk nerdy segment. Now it's pop quiz. Pop quiz. Pop quiz. The pop quiz segment.
Oh, okay.
Did you like that?
Okay.
I kind of made it a little bit different this time. Yeah. No one voted on our song, but maybe one day when we're rich and famous. And like in 5 years, and people are like, just discovered this new podcast. Andy's pop quiz is my favorite, but a little derivative. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Okay, pop quiz. Pop quiz. The standard dose of Narcan nasal spray is what?
4 milligrams.
4 milligrams. You nailed it.
Okay.
Name one way you can get naloxone.
Through your insurance or over the counter?
At a pharmacy. You nailed it. You nailed it. So that's it. That's episode 7. It was a little hectic. We got a little lost at the pop quiz part. You guys aren't going to hear that part. I'm going to take it out. But we got a little lost at the pop quiz part there.
Tell them.
I know I told him because it's funny. But I'll leave in the good questions because me and Andy had a little back and forth there. But we figured it out at the end. if you've ever seen naloxone in action or have questions about it, reach out to us, our handles, our emails, ask me a question. I'll answer them. I have nothing better to do. I love asking questions. I love answering questions. It's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
All the sources are in the show notes, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm on Instagram now at the Medicine Murders Podcast. We are also on Blue Sky, even though I'm not good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also on eventually TikTok, but I'm not good at that either.
Mm.
So right now, follow us on YouTube. It's the easiest way to comment and like and subscribe. That's it, Andy. We did it again. Oh, we are going on vacation next week. So I'm going to try and do an episode before it, but we might not have time because I do work every single day up to the vacation. We leave on Friday, January 10th, and then we're back like 10 days later. Yeah. So hopefully I'll have it scheduled. If not, you know us guys, we aren't very good at planning. So you'll get an episode from us. I ain't stopping, but it might just be a little bit longer than usual. That being said, just remember, folks, you don't need a prescription for murder. Dun dun dun.